The midday heat bore down on the settlement like a living thing, shimmering waves rolling off the metal scaffolding and dusty stone. Jackson Vane wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his calloused hand, leaning briefly on the support beam he'd been welding all morning. His body ached in that oddly satisfying way that came after hours of hard work, something he'd grown used to since leaving military service behind. Break time. 30 minutes, the foreman's voice barked across the site. Jackson set down his tools and unclipped the battered lunch pack strapped to his belt. It was the highlight of his day, half his wages gone on a rare slice of imported beef, the rest packed with ration bread and a flask of mineral water. He crossed the plaza to his usual spot, a dome-shaped boulder worn smooth by decades of wind, one of the few places where a sliver of shade clung stubbornly to the ground. Lowering himself onto the stone, he stretched his legs with a groan, unwrapped the sandwich, and breathed in the scent of real food. It reminded him of Earth, of a simpler time before deployments and outposts and firefights across nameless systems. He closed his eyes, savoring that first bite, soft bread, savory meat, the faint tang of sauce. That was when he heard it. A rustle, barely there, like fabric against stone. Jackson opened his eyes. Not 3 feet away stood a girl. Not human, her skin shimmered turquoise under the alien sun, a strange glow that deepened where the shade touched her. Wild strands of white hair framed her face, tangling past her shoulders, and her enormous sapphire eyes fixed on the sandwich in his hand. She wore ragged pink cloth that hung in tatters, stained by the settlement's dust. Hunger and fear warred in her expression, but hunger won. Before he could react, she lunged forward, snatched the sandwich from his grip, and bolted. "Hey!" Jackson half rose, instinct tightening his muscles, but something stopped him. The girl darted through the busy square, weaving between market stalls and vanishing into the crowd in seconds. His co-worker lumbered up, a four-eyed Caloran named Darrick who towered nearly 7 feet. "What's got you shouting, Vane?" "Some kid just stole my lunch," Jackson muttered. Derrick's eyes blinked in sequence. "One of the strays. Want me to call patrol?" Jackson hesitated, the memory of those frightened blue eyes lingering in his mind. He exhaled sharply. "Nah. Let it go." Darrick shrugged. "Your call. Those street rats are getting bold. Authorities ought to round them up." "She's just a kid," Jackson said, sharper than intended. The Caloran raised his upper limbs in surrender. "Easy, soldier. Didn't mean anything." Jackson tried to shake it off, tried to ignore the gnawing in his gut that wasn't just hunger. It was guilt, though he couldn't explain why. 3 days later, he cut through a narrow alley on his way back from a supply run when a flicker of turquoise caught his eye. He moved instinctively, quiet as he'd once been on patrol, circling a stack of crates until he spotted her, huddled behind a rusted waste container, clutching something close. In a single smooth motion, he reached out and caught a thin wrist. The girl froze. Slowly, she looked up, those same sapphire eyes brimming with tears. Her small body trembled in his grip. "Didn't your parents teach you not to take what isn't yours?" Jackson asked, keeping his voice firm but not unkind. I'm sorry," she whispered in broken but clear standard. Her voice was fragile, almost musical. He crouched down, bringing himself to her level. "What's your name?" "Arya," she said, eyes darting like a cornered animal. "Where are your parents, Arya?" The tears spilled over. "Gone. The plague took them last season." Something twisted hard in Jackson's chest. "So you're alone?" She shook her head quickly. "My brother. Kale. He's only 3. He's sick and hungry. The sandwich, it wasn't for me." Jackson released her wrist, sitting back on his heels. She looked even thinner up close, her cheeks hollow, her arms fragile sticks under the dirt. Malnutrition written plain as day. "Where are you staying?" he asked gently. Arya hesitated, lips pressed tight, weighing whether to trust him. "I want to help," he added. No tricks. After a long silence, she whispered, the old relay station. In the attic. Nobody goes there. Jackson nodded slowly. All right. I'm Jackson. And I think we should get some food for you and your brother. Real food, not stolen scraps. For the first time, her mouth curved upward in a small smile. It transformed her face, fleetingly replacing fear with something radiant. You're not angry about the sandwich, she asked. Let's just say you owe me one. He stood and held out his hand. She hesitated before slipping her small turquoise fingers into his rougher grip. As they walked toward the market together, Jackson felt something stir inside him, an old protective instinct he hadn't felt since his soldiering days. He couldn't explain it, only that he recognized something in her eyes. The will to survive against impossible odds. And he knew, deep down, that his life had just changed. The abandoned relay station stood on the settlement's edge, a relic of earlier expansion. Its steel ribs jutted at odd angles, rust creeping across faded panels that once gleamed with polished pride. Jackson followed Arya through a service hatch nearly hidden by vines. Inside, the air smelled of dust and metal, a silence broken only by the creak of his boots and her lighter footsteps. She led him up a rickety stairwell, then through a cramped passage to the attic. The space was surprisingly orderly, a child's attempt at creating a home. A thin blanket on the floor, a neat pile of scavenged trinkets stacked along the wall. In the corner, bundled in blue fabric, lay a boy. Kale, Arya whispered, kneeling at his side. I brought someone. A friend. The bundle stirred, and a tiny face peeked out. His skin shimmered like hers but softer, closer to aqua, his violet eyes clouded with fever. Jackson crouched beside them, lowering the sack of supplies he'd carried from the market. Hey there, little man. I'm Jackson. Kale blinked, then whispered, You're pink. Jackson chuckled. That I am. And you're blue. Turquoise, the boy corrected with surprising seriousness before breaking into a weak smile. Jackson's laugh rumbled in the attic, easing the tension for just a moment. Arya unpacked the food with trembling hands, feeding Kale slowly while Jackson studied the surroundings. The walls leaked heat, dust sifted from the beams, and yet they'd survived here for months. Children, surviving alone in a hostile colony. How long have you been here? He asked quietly. Almost a season, Arya answered, eyes never leaving her brother. After our parents died, patrols wanted to separate us. Kale to a care center, me to a labor program. Her voice hardened. I wouldn't let them. Jackson knew the type of care centers she meant. He'd seen them across the frontier, sterile cages where children were shuffled like inventory. Her choice made grim sense. You did the right thing, he said. She gave him a wary glance, as if unsure whether to believe. Silence stretched until Kale coughed, a deep rasp that shook his frail body. Arya's hand fluttered uselessly over his chest, her face pale with worry. He's been sick 3 days. The medicine I found isn't working. What's he got? Jackson asked, touching the boy's forehead. Heat radiated into his palm. Saruan fever, she whispered. It killed our parents. I thought Kale was too young to catch it. Jackson's jaw tightened. Is there a cure? Yes, but, she trailed off. But what? The medicine is only kept at the central clinic. And they don't give it to us. Not anymore. Jackson understood instantly. He'd heard rumors of new restrictions, Governor Varric Dal's edicts choking the settlement with fear. Deportations, labor camps, whispers of purges. He hadn't believed half of it. Looking at Kale's flushed face, he believed now. Before he could respond, a low mechanical whine echoed through the building. Arya stiffened, clutching her brother. Jackson moved to the attic's small window and peered out. 3 patrol craft hovered outside, their searchlights cutting through the twilight. Routine sweep, Jackson muttered, though his gut told him otherwise. They're here. Aria's face blanched. How did they find us? Doesn't matter. We're leaving. All the exits are covered, she whispered. Jackson's mouth curved into a grim smile. Not all of them. He led them to a maintenance hatch, forcing it open to reveal a narrow shaft. This'll take us to the roof. From there, we crossed to the warehouse next door. Arya packed what little they had in seconds, wrapping Kale tightly in his blanket. Jackson lifted the boy, feeling his alarming heat against his chest. Hold tight, he told Arya, handing her into the shaft before squeezing in himself. The climb was brutal. The shaft pressed tight around his shoulders, dust clogging his throat, Kale's small body heavy against him. But Arya's quiet determination ahead of him kept him moving. They emerged onto the roof as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in crimson streaks. Patrol boots thundered inside the building below them. Jackson pointed across to a warehouse. There. My worksite supply depot. I've got access. They ran, hearts pounding, crossing the gap just as shouts erupted inside the relay station. Safe in the warehouse office, Jackson set Kale down gently. Arya curled protectively around her brother, eyes glimmering in the half-light. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. Jackson sat heavily, feeling the weight of his choice press down. I've never been good at minding my own business. Why? She asked, staring at him. You barely know us. He shrugged. Where I come from, we don't leave kids to starve. It's not who we are. Her expression softened, surprise flickering across her delicate features. Your species is strange, Jackson Vane. You have no idea. He allowed himself the faintest smile, even as his mind turned grim. He'd crossed a line tonight, harboring undocumented aliens. His job, his permit, maybe his freedom, he'd risked it all without a second thought. And there was no turning back. Night deepened over the settlement, the sky above pricked with the cold shimmer of unfamiliar stars. In the warehouse office, Kale's shallow breaths rasped like brittle paper, every exhale a reminder of how little time remained. Arya sat beside him, stroking his fevered brow with trembling hands, her lips moving in quiet prayers in a language Jackson couldn't understand. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, mind racing. Saruan fever. A death sentence without treatment. The cure sat locked away in the central clinic, under the governor's new iron-fisted control. Jackson had seen guarded compounds before, military bunkers, weapon caches, and he recognized the same shadow of authority here. Medicine turned into contraband. Lives weighed against politics. We can't wait, he said at last. Arya's head snapped up. What do you mean? We're going to the clinic. Tonight. Her eyes widened, fear flashing bright. That's impossible. The security. Security can be bypassed. Jackson's voice carried the certainty of a man who had slipped past worse. We need the medicine, and we're going to get it. Arya shook her head. You'll be killed. Not if I'm careful. He stepped onto the narrow balcony, activating his comm unit. The device crackled to life, and after a moment a gruff voice answered. Jackson Vane. Thought you swore you'd never call me again. Hicks, Jackson said, a ghost of a smile tugging his lips. I need schematics for the central clinic. The pause on the other end was long, heavy. That's locked tighter than a warship's armory. 3 checkpoints, biometric locks. You sick? Not me. Jackson glanced back at Kale, who whimpered in his fevered sleep. A friend. Hicks grunted. Word is, the governor's hunting 2 Phylaxian kids. Missing. You mixed up in that? Jackson's jaw tightened. Just send me what I need. Another pause. I can get you maintenance tunnel maps. But it'll cost you. That bottle of tan whiskey you've been hoarding. Jackson grimaced. Done. When he returned inside, Arya was singing softly to Kale, her voice like liquid crystal, fragile and haunting. For a moment, Jackson stood still, something twisting in his chest at the tenderness of it. She broke off as he stepped closer. We have a way in, he told her. Her eyes flickered with hope, but also dread. I can't leave Kale. You don't have to. I know someone who can watch him. An hour later, Jackson knocked on the door of a modest home in the artisan's quarter. A woman answered, gray streaks in her tied-back hair, sharp eyes softening at the sight of him. Jackson Vane, she said, folding her arms. Trouble follows you like a shadow. Good to see you too, Dr. Lyra Marin. Her gaze flicked to Arya and the bundle in her arms. Come in. Quickly. Inside, Lyra examined Kale with swift, practiced hands. Her brow furrowed. Advanced Saruan fever. He needs Phylaxian antibiotics and azurite compound. Without them. How long does he have? Jackson asked. 2 days, maybe less. Jackson's stomach nodded. Keep him stable. We'll get what he needs. Lyra shot him a look that carried both warning and reluctant admiration. That clinic is suicide. Not the first suicide mission I've taken, Jackson said, voice hard. Hours later, under the cover of night, Jackson and Arya descended into the maintenance tunnels beneath the central district. The air smelled of disinfectant and rust, the narrow passage lit by pale strips of failing light. The pharmaceutical wing should be 2 levels up, Jackson whispered, checking Crix's schematics on his datapad. Arya walked beside him, swallowed in a stolen maintenance uniform that hung too loose on her frame. Her white hair was hidden under a cap, her sapphire eyes steady despite the fear Jackson knew must claw at her. They reached a service elevator shaft. Jackson pried open the panel, helped her inside, then followed. The climb was grueling, metal rungs biting into his palms, but they emerged onto a quiet corridor lined with sterile doors. Security's lighter than I expected, Jackson murmured. Most Calorans need longer rest cycles, Arya replied softly. They reached the pharmaceutical vault, only to find a biometric lock glowing red. Jackson cursed under his breath. We'll need staff clearance. Footsteps echoed from around the corner. Jackson pulled Arya into a recessed alcove, pressing close, shielding her small frame with his body. A tall figure in a medical officer's uniform strode past, then halted. Slowly, she turned, luminous silver eyes scanning the shadows. I know you're there, she said, her voice melodious yet commanding. Jackson's hand tightened around his weapon. He stepped forward, keeping Arya behind him. We don't want trouble. The officer's gaze widened slightly at the sight of a human. Her iridescent skin shimmered between turquoise and deep blue hues, her white hair coiled elegantly. What are you doing in a restricted wing? She demanded. Arya stepped out from behind Jackson. Please. My brother is dying. We need Phylaxian antibiotics and azurite compound. Recognition lit the woman's face. The refugee children. Her eyes shifted to Jackson. And you're helping them. Are you going to report us? Jackson asked, tension coiled tight. To his surprise, she smiled faintly. My name is Serena Thale. And I've been waiting for someone like you. Minutes later, inside the vault, Serena moved with efficient precision, gathering vials and compounds. Governor Dal has been withholding medicine from non-Caloran species, she explained. Claiming contagion to justify deportations. I've documented everything. Why risk your position? Jackson asked. Her hands stilled. Because my sister died last year. Denied treatment after marrying outside our people. Her silver eyes met his, pain and fire burning in them. Some truths matter more than safety. As she handed the medicine to Arya, her fingers brushed Jackson's. A spark leapt between them, startling in its intensity. The air seemed to hum, as though charged by something unspoken. "This will cure your brother," Serenia said. "But you can't stay here. Governor Dal has ordered a purge of Phylaxians. It begins tomorrow." Aria's breath caught. "A purge?" Serenia nodded grimly. "Forced deportations to mining colonies. I have evidence to expose him, but it must reach the Galactic Council. I can't do it alone." Before Jackson could reply, alarms blared. Red lights flared along the corridor. "They've detected us," Serenia said sharply. "We need to move." She led them through a concealed passage toward her private quarters, downloading files onto a secure drive as security pounded at the locked door. 5 minutes. That's all they had. And in those 5 minutes, Jackson and Serenia's eyes met across the room, something fierce and undeniable passing between them. Courage, recognition, the dangerous spark of attraction forged in fire. For the first time since he'd left the military, Jackson felt it again, that clarity before a mission, when every choice mattered. And he knew, as surely as the stars burned above, that nothing in his life would ever be the same. The pounding on Serenia's quarters door grew louder, the metal frame groaning as security overrides worked to break her lock. She snapped her data drive into a slim case and slung it over her shoulder, her movements sharp with urgency. 5 minutes at best, Jackson said, checking his weapon. "Then we don't waste a single one," Serenia replied, her silver eyes flashing. She tapped a panel on the far wall, revealing a narrow passage. "This leads to the residential sector. If we split up, they'll be less likely to catch us." "No," Jackson said, voice hard. "We stay together. We get the medicine back to Kale, then figure out the rest." Arya clutched the bundle of vials, her face pale but determined. "He doesn't have long." They fled into the passage just as the lock blew apart behind them, the sound of boots echoing in pursuit. The cramped corridor twisted and narrowed, but Serenia led them unerringly, her steps confident. At last, they emerged into the dimly lit streets. "We'll regroup at your safe house," Serenia whispered. 2 hours. Before Jackson could answer, she caught his arm, her silver gaze piercing. "Thank you. For reminding me that some battles are worth fighting." Then, before he could react, she pressed her lips to his in a brief, electric kiss that left him stunned even as she slipped ahead into the night. When Jackson and Arya reached Dr. Lyra Marin's home, Kale was still burning with fever but alive. Lyra administered the medicine swiftly, her lined face softening in relief as the child's breathing steadied. "Just in time," she murmured. Arya wept quietly as Kale stirred and whispered her name. Jackson turned away, watching the window, waiting for Serenia. An hour later, a knock came. "Who is it?" Jackson called, weapon in hand. "A friend who appreciates human courage," came the melodic reply. Relief surged through him as he opened the door. Serenia stepped inside, now dressed in plain civilian clothing, but before she could speak, shadows followed her. 3 figures slipped into the room, Phylaxians, dressed in nondescript garb, their expressions wary. "Medical Officer Thale," their leader said. "We've been searching for you." Serenia inclined her head. "Rylen. I was coming to you." The man's gaze shifted to Jackson. "A human? That complicates things." "He saved us," Serenia said firmly. "And he's helping the children." Rylen studied Jackson with open distrust, but before more could be said, Lyra emerged. "The boy's responding to treatment. He'll need another dose in 6 hours." At the mention of Kale, some of the tension eased. Rylen nodded slowly. "We came for the evidence. If you have it, we can get it to our council contact." "I have it," Serenia confirmed. "But we won't leave without the children." Rylen frowned. "Governor Dal accelerates the purge at dawn. We've arranged a transport in 3 hours. We can take Serenia, the evidence, the children, and the doctor." His tone made it clear Jackson was not included. "I'm not leaving without him," Serenia said, stepping closer to Jackson. Jackson met Raylan's suspicious glare evenly. "We all go, or none of us." A long silence passed before Raylan relented. "Very well. But we move quickly." The plan was simple but desperate: escape through maintenance tunnels to the spaceport, board a disguised supply transport, and slip off-world before dawn. But as they gathered their things, sirens wailed outside, followed by the whine of security hovercrafts. "They found us," Lyra hissed. "Basement," she added quickly. "It connects to the old water system." "They'll have it covered," Arya whispered, eyes wide with fear. "Then we give them something else to chase," Jackson said, already thinking ahead. "I'll draw them off. You take the others through the tunnels." "That's suicide," Serenia protested, grabbing his arm. "Not if I time it right. They'll be looking for Phylaxians, not a human worker." Raylan grudgingly agreed. "He's right. They won't expect you." Jackson crouched in front of Arya, brushing her tangled white hair back gently. "Take care of Kale. Stick with Lyra and Serenia. I'll meet you at Docking Bay 12 in 2 hours. You'll come back?" she asked, voice small. "Count on it," Jackson said, forcing a smile. "Besides, you still owe me a sandwich." That earned him a watery laugh, which was all he needed to steel himself. The explosion rattled the eastern quarter like thunder, flames licking skyward from a ruptured pipe. Security forces swarmed the blast site, giving Jackson just enough of a gap to smash through an upper window and bolt across the rooftops. The chase was fierce, blaster fire hissing past him, but he kept moving, leading them deeper into the industrial sector. He knew these streets better than they did, slipping through drainage channels and refinery ducts until at last he reached the spaceport perimeter. His comm vibrated with a single message: Bay 12. Code 4872. Serenia. At the bay, the disguised transport waited. The hatch opened, Serenia's face appearing, relief flooding her features. "You made it." "Told you I would," Jackson replied, climbing aboard. Arya rushed into his arms, Kale clinging to him weakly but smiling. "We're clear," Raylan called from the cockpit as the ship launched into the sky. Moments later, hyperspace swallowed them whole, streaks of stars blurring into endless light. Relief turned to dread when a transmission lit the command deck. Governor Dow's voice boomed across the settlement square, rows of humans under guard behind him. "In response to recent crimes, all human workers will be detained until the fugitives surrender. Jackson Vane, reveal yourself, or your people will pay." Jackson's gut clenched. Faces he knew, co-workers, neighbors, stared out from the screen in fear. "We can't abandon them," he said, his voice like stone. "It's suicide," Raylan argued. "Not if I surrender myself," Jackson said. "He wants me. Once I'm in custody, he'll release the hostages." "No," Serenia snapped, her silver eyes blazing with anguish. "He'll execute you." "Not if you're already at the council with the evidence," Jackson countered. "Once they open an investigation, Dow won't dare." The plan formed quickly: Serenia, Kale, and Raylan would continue to the council, delivering the evidence, while Jackson returned with Arya and Lyra to confront the governor. It was madness, but it was the only way. Dawn painted the plaza in pale fire when Jackson stepped forward, Arya at his side. The crowd parted in hushed murmurs as Governor Dow sneered down from the stage. "So. The fugitive returns." "I'm here for them," Jackson said, pointing at the line of human workers. "Release them. They're innocent." "They harbor criminals," Dow spat. "They harbor children you denied medicine," Jackson shot back, his voice ringing across the plaza. "Orphans whose parents died under your lies." Arya's young voice carried clear and strong. "My parents spoke of your crimes before they died. You let us suffer because we weren't Caloran. Unease rippled through the crowd. Even the guards shifted, uncertain. Before Dal could respond, an elder pushed forward, Counselor Corvin, draped in authority. He held up a datapad flashing the seal of the Galactic Council. "Governor Dal," he thundered, "you are suspended pending investigation into species discrimination and medical malpractice." Gasps tore through the plaza. On the screens, Serenia appeared before the council, Kale healthy in her arms. The evidence had arrived. The governor's face twisted in fury, but his own guards hesitated. The tide had turned. 3 days later, under new leadership, the settlement buzzed with cautious hope. At the spaceport, Jackson waited. The council vessel docked, and when Serenia stepped out with Kale on her hip, his chest tightened. Kale spotted him first. "Jackson," he cried, launching into his arms. Arya followed, hugging him tight. Then Serenia was there, her silver eyes shimmering with emotion. Jackson didn't hesitate, he pulled her into his arms, their kiss sealing what words couldn't. "Welcome home," he whispered. "Home," she echoed softly. "Yes. I suppose it is." As the four of them walked together through the plaza, human, Phylaxian, soldier, doctor, Jackson felt something he hadn't in years. Not duty. Not survival. Family. And all of it had begun with a stolen sandwich. And that's where we'll leave this story, a stolen meal that became the spark of rebellion, a desperate chase that forged unlikely bonds, and a fight that transformed strangers into family. Jackson, Arya, Kale, and Serenia remind us that sometimes the smallest choices, an act of mercy, a refusal to look away, can ripple into something far greater.